What's up, everyone? This is Harvey Krishna, and you're listening to Lavaside Chats. So, my idea with this podcast is just to sit down and have conversations with many of the colorful characters inhabiting this corner of Twitter. And just learning a little bit more about who they are, what their deal is, and try to go a little bit deeper than what we usually get in 280 characters. So for this inaugural episode, I had a really good conversation with Beast. Some of you may know him from his nature posts, hiking around in the Appalachian Mountains. Others of you might know him from his occasionally perverted poetry, which, by the way, we didn't get to in this episode. We just got caught up talking about a bunch of other stuff. So, Beast, you're definitely coming back some other time, and we'll get to talk about all the obscenities you post all over the bird site. But without further ado, hope you enjoy this Lavaside Chat with Beast. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Beast for the first podcast of this podcast that's yet to be named. We'll get to that some other day. And Beast, good to be chatting. Maybe to start us off, if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself, whether that's the alt, the human, the cosmic awareness inhabiting the human body. You can introduce yourself at whatever level you want.
Sure. I'm Beast. I got a Twitter account maybe 2 years ago as a way to bitch at the city of Asheville after the water went out like a third time. And then I got, that was on a different account. And then I got this account. And I intended to promote my writing, but I never ended up putting it up for sale. But I still use the pseudonym Beast on everything that I write, including this Twitter account. I just really like the name. It comes from a mixture of a childhood nickname given to me by my parents, actually, and just this idea of human beings, and of course, the idea of Satan, which I think is fun and hilarious.
Amazing. I have so many questions just with that.
Sure.
First, how did you earn the nickname Beast from your parents?
I was a horrifying child.
How so?
I talked incessantly. I did not pay attention in class. I have an attention deficit disorder, and they just called me the Beast, which I think is fair. I think it's valid.
Yeah. And do you feel this is a persona that, along with the nickname, has there been a persona that you've grown into? Or how do you relate to this alt or alter ego, however you see it?
It's an interesting question. I've grown up my entire life, and I think this is common of many people who grew up on the internet. I've been growing from username to username. I don't know if there are many other generations that have had this experience in the past other than people who were kind of engaged in a writer community. But for our generation, we've moved from screen name to screen name. And for me, typically, I did not use my real name. I never used my real name. I started when I was like 13 or 12 using the name Coldfire because I thought I was a badass because I saw a hacker use the name Coldfire on TV. And then I moved forward and forward and forward. The name Beast, actually, I chose while I was kind of in an anxious and depressed state. I had just moved to the area of Asheville, North Carolina, to be with my, at the time, girlfriend. And I needed a pseudonym to write under to make me feel comfortable. And I felt like a wretched beast. And I felt that it kind of touched on the most base and disgusting parts of humanity. Well, I won't even say, yes, disgusting, but base. The basest parts of humanity, the animal. And I was trying to get more and more honest with my writing at the time. And I actually published a set of 12 zines under the name Beast. And I was going to promote them and sell some of that writing online, but I never actually put it online. Mm-hmm. So in regards to whether this is a persona or not, it is a screen name and persona, a nom de plume, truly, chosen for a time to reflect a semblance of self that I may or may not have outgrown, but still enjoy.
Got it. Very complete description.
Sure.
And I'm curious, with regard to the writing under this pen name of Beast, I remember at one point you posted a writing magazine where a piece of yours or a few pieces had been included. Yep. How does that work? That whole process of whether it's, submitting your writing to a publication or I imagine you're having to engage with actual human beings. Like, how do you preserve the anonymity if you are? What does that all look like?
I'm poor at it. I am poor at preserving the anonymity. I accidentally submitted some of my writing to even another Twitter friend under my own name, which is fine. It could have been a lot worse person that I submitted it to. But this person that I submitted to, I submitted it under the name The Beast, but I had to give him my name in order for him to send me money, which was very important. I like money. And I have a hard time deciding what I want to be published under one name or another. I haven't really had much else published, and this literary journal is actually an extension of a 4chan board, which was a big driver for me to continue to use the nom de plume, especially because the first essay that I had published, which kind of was edited to a point that I didn't like, but it was about the use of racially charged language on 4chan boards, and it discussed my reading and how I'd been reading fascist what's the term, manifestos, fascist manifestos. Okay. Every time there was a shooting, I would immediately seek out a manifesto of the guy, usually on 8chan, by the way, which is now a honeypot. And I would read it because I don't trust any media outlets' rendition of anything because they don't understand. They may have a person go on who does understand to read these things, but a lot of those people don't trawl the forums like I do, or probably you do. We being in the sphere of Twitter that we are, or me being a 4chaner that I am in a unique place to be able to understand the discourse and how it has evolved. From a perspective that anyone in the mainstream media would not understand. And so I often found myself on the literature board on 4chan, and this crazy motherfucker decided to finance his own literary journal using his own money because he didn't get into a school that he wanted to. And I submitted a couple of pieces, and I've been published twice in it. And that's it. I don't submit anywhere else because I'm an idiot.
Wait, and these publications, is something that's actually getting printed, getting sold in magazine shops, bookshops, and so on? Like, what?
You can buy them on Amazon. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Cool. I think they put a few in local bookstores. I know that's how I've sold my zines, entirely from one bookstore in Asheville, North Carolina. Shout out to Downtown Books and News, which is one of the coolest bookstores around, just by the way. But that's the only place that I've dropped off my zines. Yeah, plug them. Fuck yeah, plug local bookstores, always.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, going back to 4chan, 8chan, my exposure to these sites has always been 1 degree removed. It was always through Reddit, best of 4chan. That's literally been almost all the exposure I've gotten. And then now on Twitter, somehow hear about it as well. But I'm curious to hear what you just mentioned. If in the case of a shooting and you'd go seek out this person's manifesto, and because you didn't trust the mainstream media to report it as it was, I'm curious if you ever had an instance where by reading the manifesto you got some totally different kind of insight into who
Absolutely.
this person was or what had
There
happened.
go my headphones. 1 second. Hopefully you can cut out the part where I just tear the headphones out of my ears with my toes.
No, that's staying. That's gold.
Okay, so no, I've been on 4chan since 2009, for better and worse. I found the boards interesting, of course, at the time because there was a lot of like weird porn and gore and shit like that. But that's only part of it. I was on a lot of Adderall at the time, and I would stay up to very bizarre hours just talking to people on the internet. 4chan, you know what? The meme there is like 4chan used to be good, and then the inevitable response is 4chan was never good. Yes, but it used to be a little better. You could have an actual conversation. Now it's just porn spam and whatever. Regardless, I've always had an interest in racially charged terminology and diction, but beyond that, ideology. I think it's fascinating, and part of it's due to, you know, I was raised a Jew. I'm born and raised a Jew, and you know, you get these like mainstream perspectives of the experience of marginalized peoples and of racist peoples, racist ideologies, which are marginalized. And you know, I don't. It's not that I support them, but I mean, it's the same thing of like, if you actually want to understand what these people are and what they're going through, you must read them in their own terms. With the most recent cases of, you know, say especially the Christchurch shooting, which was a fantastic, bizarre example of terrorism in the modern era. You had very specific terminology used throughout the man's piece of propaganda, throughout his manifesto, that would only make sense to people who have a certain awareness of the Chans, straight up, and a certain awareness of the racial, of the racist ideologies. You know, they were well-researched productions, even if cognitively the work that he produced was shit. It fell apart at various points. The logic was poor, but it could grasp people mimetically. And I don't think that our media does a very good job of explaining why language has the power that it has. It because it masks that language, because it's either afraid of using that language, thinking it has a responsibility to the masses to mask it or to frame it as inherently inimical, inherently false, which puts people on guard against it. You know, fine. It's fine to be on guard against things, but you're never going to have a population that's engaging with or actively thinking about information in its primary sources, if that's where you're at as a publisher, and perhaps that's what they want, but it's not what I want. What was your initial question? I forgot.
Oh, I had just asked exactly this: what your experience had been in seeing an event, seeing a shooting happen, and then going to do your own research by reading that person firsthand.
I also want to point out that, like, for at least a period of time, I haven't done it recently, but I still do sometimes. When a shooting occurs, when a terrorist attack occurs, or when some major news event occurs, the first places I'm headed to, aside from like the Drudge Report, Reddit, whatever, is 4chan poll, 8chan poll, or, you know, you got to go to, like, you know, occasionally bizarre little subreddits, because Reddit is more and more shit. But the places where the Anons lurk, because that's where like raw footage gets leaked to almost immediately. If you want to see what actually happened and make up your own fucking mind about it, there you are.
Interesting. I had a bit of that experience with all the protests and riots that happened after George Floyd, because that was just after I had gotten on Twitter. So it was my first experience of, in a sense, you know, consuming this world event and media of it in a more unfiltered way, because it was just tons of video clips being uploaded by people literally out there on the streets, and it blew my mind how different it was to, vicariously experience those events through these videos that in a sense were unfiltered, uploaded
Certainly.
seconds right after a person had shot it, and how different that experience was from how I would have seen it through mainstream media, which at that point I was like, I'm not even going to bother going to the typical mainstream media outlets because it's going to be something
It
a
was
lot
fucking
more
worthless, wasn't it?
filtered, and
Yeah.
it was empty calories. It was not informative in the way everything I was seeing on Twitter was.
And that's something interesting about, like, it's editorialized, but the phenomenon of things like all gas, no brakes, say, where you have these individuals going out. It's a resurgence of gonzo fucking journalism,
Yeah,
truly, because like even the cameramen who were live streaming from the protests as they happened, they were part of the story, and they were capturing the story. I think we're in an era of the renaissance of gonzo journalism. I think it's on its way. But I completely agree. When that was happening for me, it was like 2012 maybe. When was the Arab Spring? I think that was around the time. I got on Reddit for the first time around then. That's when I got my profile, I believe. And I was consuming news and well more aware of what was happening in the Arab Spring than my family or whatever, than the people around me. I hadn't really spent much time on 4chan poll yet. Mostly, like, I went there just to see, like, and I still do, what are people saying about the Jews, and when do I need to leave the country? Like, that's my neurosis. But with Reddit, you actually, for a time, had a very good platform for disseminating up-to-date and immediate information. I think Twitter, at the present, is actually the best source for me for that, in conjunction with, say, shadowy little websites that, or chans. I think chans are a good place for people who are obsessed.
Yeah, that's insane. So what? Going back to what you mentioned, some major event happens in the world. First place you're going to go check out is one of the chans. Besides, the actual footage of what's happening, what else do you encounter there that is obviously not being shared in mainstream media?
Oh, just the miasma of smut. Like, people just, you get all the just immediate opinions that are just like, okay, well, there's a white nationalist, there's a fascist, there's a Nazi, there's the ANCOM, there's a communist, there's a Maoist, all these bizarre perspectives that, like, you get, and something that I've had to learn over time is the people that post on these websites are not a great example usually of the ideology. But you often do find very good examples of the ideology that really typify the ideology among them. So you have a bizarre group of individuals offering commentary that you are not going to get in most places. You can get it on Twitter to a certain extent, but Twitter filters out certain terms and certain kinds of hate speech. And I don't even like it when hate speech is filtered out, honestly. I like freedom of expression to be as pure as possible when I'm consuming it. And here's the weird part. In recent years, I've started to take a certain, let's say the amendment that I have supported the most out of all of them over the years has been the first. Freedom of speech is the most important to me. I'm kind of a radical in terms of that. But at the same time, I don't know if a lot of people can handle it. I think that a lot of people aren't, like, medically, they don't have antibodies. They were either brought up too much online, or they were brought up without understanding what the internet actually fucking is. Boomers, say. And I think people will suffer from this delusion that reading a thing makes it exist.
I'm curious, how would growing up online lead you to not having good antibodies and not be down with just full-on First Amendment protected free speech?
I could be completely wrong, but the longer that you spend online sometimes, And in certain spaces, the more prone you become to kind of adopting their language, their terminology, and being able to be conversant in their viewpoints, which isn't necessarily a negative. I mean, you have people like, say, Ayla, who was raised a extreme Christian by an autistic apologist, and abused into that mindset, and she is extremely conversant in that form of in that form of religious discourse, and that has only benefited her, but it took her a while. I think a lot of people may not necessarily grow out of that or get into echo chambers. Now, the good thing about the internet is it allows people to turn off the discourse. But if most of your friends are anonymous names online, then I don't know how easy it's going to be turn off in the future. You'll just be able to, like, I don't know, what does friendship become? What does conversation become when everything is fully digitized?
Yeah.
I don't think people are more literate than they were. I think that they read more than they were, but I think there's a distinction to be made between the actual comprehension of reading and just the recognition of symbols and patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the friendship bit, because I do see how, I don't know, online, and especially when it's anonymous, we're all just behind alt names and anime avis and whatnot. There's a certain component that disappears, which you do have in real life, which is just having a real live human being in front of you and seeing how they are responding to everything you're saying.
Yeah.
The micro gestures and body language and so on. So I think it's easier to just throw something out into the void of Twitter or whatever other digital space when you don't have to deal with what the effects of that communication is going to be. Certainly,
and I think that allows people to be a lot more abusive, but also more honest in some ways.
Yeah, that's true. That would definitely be the positive effect of all this.
But again, yeah, that negative, you can throw whatever you want at people, and there's not necessarily any fallout, because it kind of externalizes the costs of your negative behavior.
Yeah.
There's no one to make you suffer, and sometimes you need to suffer. Yeah. People should suffer for their actions sometimes.
To suffer, or just, I imagine sitting at a table with a group of friends, and you're being an asshole to one person. You're not only going to see the effects of your words on that person that you're being an asshole to, but you're also going to see the effects on everyone else around them. And often that can be looks of disapproval, or that body language indicating, what the fuck are you saying? And that's something that's not going to happen as easily online, unless you have those, legend accounts who do come in and in a very direct way say, hey, what you just posted is not cool. What you just replied is not cool.
And it's funny, because even I found myself not necessarily wanting to offend a lot of people on Twitter. I like people. I'm a fundamentally, I want to engage with people in an earnest and well-meaning way. And the idea of arbitrarily hurting people, their feelings, not necessarily their, if I say bullshit about the Pope and they're offended by that, I don't give a fuck. And that's pretty much the case in real life too. But I don't necessarily want to insult people. I think that digging at people who aren't the Pope isn't necessarily, it's not kind, and it's not a good way to engage in discourse. But even if I was that kind of person, if I were speaking to someone in real life and saying, hey, you're a piece of shit and you're ugly, and by the way, I read that thing that you wrote and then I wiped my ass with it, I would maybe get punched. That's a thing. So there's good and bad to the mutual threat of existing in meat space. I think it offers some constraints to social behavior. And I think that those constraints are largely physical and somewhat fear-based, which can be good. But like online, you lose some of those constraints, but also perhaps some of the capacity to engage in earnest discourse beyond that would only be possible physically when you're physically present. So, I, you know, when you're forced to be kind to people, it's different. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Good and bad, as with everything. All right, so I wanted to switch gears a bit. You're in the Appalachian Mountains. Tell us
Yes.
about Appalachia. Why is it a strange and weird place, as you mentioned earlier?
Well, so God, I'm gonna throw it into a biography here, an autobiography. Okay. Back in the old days, I'm from North Texas, just outside of Dallas, and where I grew up was kind of a placid, safe, and wealthy suburb, and boring as fuck, which is fine. It was a fine place to be raised, but I had to leave at some point, and frankly, I graduated college with a political science degree, and I didn't want to do anything in law or politics. And I had a girlfriend who lived in Appalachia, and I was working in a kitchen, and she pressured me, not against my will, honestly, to like just fucking moving out here. And so I did. 4 years ago now, and I immediately went from a place where the streets were dense, where there were no real physical features to the land. It was very flat, and very built over, to an area that was predominantly wilderness, which was a fantastic change, and also that had great natural beauty. So I went from a place that was dominated by an anthropogenic environment to one that was still, to a large extent, unaffected by it, which was a blessing, especially for me at the time, who had only lived in a city and who was experiencing tremendous anxiety, still coming off of Adderall, still dealing with with too much drinking, that kind of thing. That being said, my ex also came from she came from a poorer background than I. She came from West Virginia, and so she was quite familiar with Appalachia and the surrounding area, and she drove me around it. And I saw poverty unlike really the poverty that I'd ever seen, other than in Texas, in a dense city, you have homelessness, and that's just something you have everywhere. You also have ghettos. You have shitty areas to live. But I had never seen a house that was just two trailers welded together on the side of a river before. And there are people that just live out here. They just post up, and that's it. It's just like, fuck it. This is where I am, and this is where I'll die. And, you have actual hill people here, people who just like posted up 150 years ago, and they've just been, I guess, fucking in the hills ever since. So it's a completely different kind of poverty and a completely different kind of culture of poverty there.
Do you consider that this poverty is, how do I phrase this? Like, from the background you came from, obviously there was this big juxtaposition between those neighborhoods that you had experienced, to now you see two trailers welded together on the side of a river.
Yep.
In relation to what you had experienced before, yes, of course, we can call this poverty, but sort of evaluating more these people and how they live and how they view their own lives. How much of it is it poverty? How much of it is it just, this is the life that I was born into, and this is the life that I want to continue living?
Well, that's the real mixture, and like part of seeing these people live the way that they did, and seeing them continue to live the way they do. I live among, to some extent, I now interact with farmers on a semi-regular basis. people who choose to live with a lot less money and are extremely happy. And, you know, I've chosen that kind of to a certain extent myself. I won't say that I'm impoverished. I eat very well. But, you know, and I do exactly as I want, I suppose. I read. I'm super lazy about writing, but I write when I want to. And that's really most of what I need in life. I just want to create and whatever. And I think that the big juxtaposition for me was coming from an environment in the suburbs where, and this is a point that I've gone over, I think, in writing, I'm not sure. The urban environment is wholly human constructed, and everything there is gauged in terms of possession. Because there is not much nature and there aren't a tremendous amount of public works, everywhere you go, you have to pay to be. You know, it's life is largely gauged by human-made things and their consumption. And when you move out to a place where these aren't the dominant themes of the landscape, people actually engage with things that do not require anything of them. Say, you know, you can go on top of a mountain and just be on top of a mountain. And that is more than fine. It's great. You know, there's communities built around it. You don't have to pay a lot. As long as you have a pair of fucking shoes and a car, you can find a trailhead and just walk. And I think that an environment that demands less of you and an environment where you have more room to develop your interests outside of material is a much healthier place for the mind, for myself. And these people who kind of post up on the side of a river, you know, it is a kind of poverty. Absolutely. Some of these people are very poor, and some of them don't like it, but some of them chose to do that. Some of them were born into it, and they don't give a fuck. And I find that more than comforting. I find it to be an enlightening way to live, and good sort of people to interact with every now and then.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, that was sort of what I was trying to get at with my question, because I thought about I traveled in Burma for a month,
Sure.
and people live very simple lives there. Like, I'm talking not even trailers; these are wooden huts on the side of the river. Like, you really feel you just went back in time a century, if not more. But I interacted a lot with the locals there, and everyone's so friendly, and so many people invited me into their homes. And you enter into these people's homes, and they're very, very simple. They don't have much in them, but you see that they keep them tidy, they keep them clean, and they showed me around their homes with such pride. And I love that. You know, it was incredible to see someone with so little compared to the lifestyles that I'm used to living and seeing. So with so little, and yet there was this pride and dignity in what they had. So yeah, that's what I was curious if it's something that you've seen in people in the Appalachia, where yes, they must be more starkly aware of the relative poverty that they live in because they're living in fucking America.
Yeah.
And yet they may have this opportunity to reframe their situation in this more enlightened way, as you mentioned, you know, where you can derive meaning, satisfaction from things other than the things you own and consume.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's a real mix here. Some of the people are just wretched about it.
Yeah.
But, you know, some people have chosen a simple lifestyle, and I can really appreciate people choosing a simple lifestyle at this point in my life, because that's kind of what I do. You know, I don't have much. I own a TV, 3 bookcases, a bed, clothes, and a computer and a car. Like, that's about it. And some cooking materials. And I don't really want much more. I mean, if I were rich, of course I'd have a house and just buy books like an idiot. But like, everything that I really need, I have. And I can vibe with that. I can understand it, and I can understand happiness with a little, and perhaps more easily understand happiness with a little than happiness with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And
That
I think
resonates a lot.
yeah, and I think that's why I feel comfortable out here, as opposed to like in the suburbs where everything is kind of measured by brand names and where your fucking kids went to college, and like just really kind of boring titular, everything in the name, as opposed to everything from sort of its intrinsic worth or its worth to the individual.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so maybe to finish up this first episode, when we were scheduling this call, you mentioned it had to be for a certain time because you had a D&D campaign going on. And before we started recording this, you mentioned that it's mainly your friends who are into it, and you sort of tag along to hang with them, which I think is going to be an even more interesting vantage point into what D&D is all about, because I know nothing about it. Beyond it being some kind of board game, but it seems a lot more involved than that. I really think most of my exposure to Dungeons and Dragons is through Stranger Things and the boys playing D&D in the basement. So yeah, can you give me the basics of what D&D is all about, and why is it so popular in this corner of Twitter as well? That's been surprising.
So I'm gonna add this whole segment with a caveat that I'm an extreme noob, and I've only played 2 D&D campaigns, neither to completion, and 1 Pathfinder one-shot. So there's that. But
everyone can pile on in the replies on any mistakes or noob things you say.
Yeah, sure. No, well, I've always liked RPGs, and anyone who's played any video games, they're my favorite because they're story-based. And I've always been a fan of narrative one way or another. So I think that anything that kind of allows the mind to wander in a world is attractive to me. Now, I prefer to get my fill through fiction and the occasional video game. But I have a bunch of friends who really like D&D, and I like my friends, and I don't hang out with them otherwise because I live states away now. So for once a week, for about 3-4 hours, we get together and play a D&D campaign, which is just, the one that I'm in right now is vicious. It's horrifying. We're slavers.
And you're getting together, you said these are friends states away, so this is a virtual campaign that you're doing?
It's a virtual campaign. We use Roll20 and Discord. Yeah. But I think the most interesting question that you actually asked is, why is our corner of Twitter, and it's a bizarre thing, it's a nebulous idea, our corner. What does that even mean? I'm not sure. And it would be an interesting thing if we could label it, find some sort of a title for it. But, I think of people like, say, Liminal Warmth, who is a magic-based individual and also a fiction writer. I think you see people like that, and people such as her are attracted to fiction from the outset and engaging with fictional worlds. You see a lot of people in our corner playing with GPT-3 as well. Mm-hmm. These kind of bots that are just these dreams that you wander through, and they seem to auto-generate as you go. Now, D&D isn't necessarily that, although it can be if you have a dungeon master who is skilled enough to be able to just go on and on and on. But it's kind of this procedurally generated world that you can wander off into that is absolutely engaging. But beyond that, you also have a bunch of system heads in our corner, people who love engaging with the system, optimizing it, and tweaking it until it just fucks everything up, in a good way, of course. So, I mean, I think what you've asked is an interesting question that I'm not truly equipped to answer, but I enjoy it for the socialization and the imagination. And I believe that our corner of Twitter also would enjoy it for those things as well as the mechanic.
Yeah. From what you just said, I sort of got that there's a left brain and a right brain component to D&D.
Absolutely.
I can't remember which is which with the brains, but I'm getting that there's one part that's more about world building and the fantasy in it, the narrative, and in a sense appealing more to that sense of aesthetics and wonder. And then there's another side that's the system, as you mentioned,
I'm very much more into
rules, procedures, and how to optimize for that.
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. My character right now is disgusting. He's like a used salesman for God, and his God is literally the slime god. It's Gaunadar, and all he does is try to convince people to kill themselves for his God. That's his sole purpose in life. It's so good.
Tell me more how you choose a character in D&D. This is like when people are talking about mages and paladins and all this shit. This is D&D, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it's whatever I think is fucking funny. And this character is fucking funny. Like, he's just a very low intelligence but very charismatic dark elf who's completely devoted to the slime god. And I think I just think that it's great. He, pulls out the teeth of people he doesn't like and wears them. I appreciate people like that. They're very... Yeah.
It sounds like Beast as expressed in a D&D character.
I've always enjoyed the more I've liked Marilyn Manson, shock rock. I've always liked that kind of shit. I've always liked the filth. I think that Beast kind of gets at that, and I think that the characters that I produce are grotesque, and I appreciate that as well.
Love it. All right, Beast. Well, I think that's the perfect spot to end this podcast. So yeah, thanks so much for signing on and having this chat with me and share a bit more about the person behind the alt and the alt persona himself with everyone else on Twitter.
Yeah, well, this was fun. I've never done anything like this before, Mr. Krishna, and it was an absolute pleasure. You're a pretty cool guy.
Thank you.